Hey, what's up guys? So we're going to be checking out another Warhammer 40k video by Bricky, and this one is called What's the Best Warhammer 40k Faction / Army to Start With. Now, after watching a few of like Bricky's videos, like him explaining the Space Marine Legions and also like the Warhammer factions, I started like seeing like some videos of like him doing podcasts and also like some sort of like tabletop game. So I guess this is what where it's gonna fit in, like which should you start with. And also on top of that, I saw some of you guys comments saying like, yeah, Bricky's not a fan of anime, so okay, I get it. I understand now. But yeah, for me too, I'm not a fan of anime. I mentioned this in several videos. I tried to get into anime because I met some Marines that are big fans of anime. I mean like big. But when I watch like some episodes with them or like some of the things they watch, I don't know, it doesn't like intrigue me or it doesn't like interest me, so I'm not a fan of anime just like Bricky. But without anything else, let's check out what is the best faction or army to start with if you're a beginner. So let's get into it.
I must say the support on my prior Warhammer video has been, to put it lightly, absolutely outstanding. I've not had a video perform that well in maybe 3 to 4 years, and it's also a breath of fresh air to be able to make a video on something on a whim, on Warhammer, a, while very popular game, not a game that I ever really made videos on, and to have it perform as well as it does. You know, YouTube and the YouTube world doesn't like change very much, so it is incredibly heartwarming. But with that, it also came with a question that was always being asked to me ever since making that video. Hey Bricky, what army should I play? So for this, my next major Warhammer video, I'm going to answer that question. I'm going to go over all the different kinds of armies just like we went with the main video, except instead of lore, we're going to be going through the different various ways of collecting the army, as in not only price-wise, but how many models you're going to need, how new or old the model scopes are, and we're going to be going over the play styles of each army respectively. Are they melee? Are they shooting? Are they a little bit of both? Elite armies with only 20 models on the battlefield, or horde armies with 120 models on the battlefield? We're going to be discussing all of those, what each army is about, and give you at least a decent run through of every single faction to allow you to make the conscious and intelligent choice on which army you want to play if you want to get into the tabletop of Warhammer 40,000. But first, before we start, I need to show you something. So I own an absolute like boatload of wall art all across my house. I've received from cons, and so when I was contacted by Displate to sponsor this video, it was like an immediate yes. Anyway, I wanted to show you the ones I got because Displate is the sponsor for this video. The first one is a wonderful one from the Coen brothers, No Country for Old Men.
So I know what Displate is. I've seen it a few times pop up on Instagram, and it does intrigue me. Like, because I looked it up and say, just like putting in titles, I've seen Halo, I've seen Star Wars, I've seen Assassin's Creed, and I've seen also Warhammer 40k. And I thought about it, like during like the sales, like just posting a few of them like on my wall, you know, just for decorations for you guys to watch. But the thing is, I'm gonna hold off on that because I'm not gonna be here in a few months. I'll be like doing some other things, so I don't want to like carry those things around. So I'm like keeping note of Displate for like future references, like once I get like a solid like my own place, you know, just like a solid place, I know I'm gonna be there for a while. All right, let's continue.
It's probably my favorite movie of all time because I am a messed up human being and I like the dark,
I haven't watched that movie.
Shit. However, this one, I love it. It's very simplistic and it shows off the simplistic poster art that I tend to enjoy a lot. Now, past that, I actually got one for my mother because she is a huge Stephen King fan, so I got this fantastic Pennywise one to go along with it. And the third one I got actually was from fellow YouTuber Vaddy Vidya. You may know him. He did Dark Souls content and, well, From Software content in general. And he has, I can't show you it right now because I got the extra large version because I wanted the big one of his. It is a absolute like gorgeous piece. It is just as nice looking in real life as I expected. Now, it come to my surprise that after I ordered 3 separate displays to go along with the sponsorship, I immediately received 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 extra ones and then change. And I kind of start realizing why they wanted a Warhammer video so much. Orcs, 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 orcs. Gotta have Orcs, Sisters of Battle. We'll be talking plenty about them today. Angels of Death in all their glory. More Angels of Death in all their glory. And a Drukhari, I don't know what this is. Is it an Archon? It might be an Archon. I don't play Drukhari. But obviously Dark Eldar. I know the spikes. I get the spikes. I love the fact that you can just slap it onto your wall with a magnet with no fuss. And especially for someone who was renting a place, and I know a lot of you have had those experiences with landlords where you try to hang up wall art, you put a nail into the wall, and they're like, oh, ooh, is that a 2mm hole I see right there? That's $300 out of your security deposit, kid. So thank you very much, Display, for sponsoring this video. I would highly recommend checking them out. They make absolutely fantastic stuff. So check them out, they're in the description, and let us continue with the video, starting off with a couple terminology we should learn before we actually get super deep into it. First things first, there's a thing called Forge World. Forge World is actually a lore thing with the Adeptus Mechanicus. However, what it is actually a partner to Games Workshop. Forge World makes these kind of custom minis that aren't in the codexes specifically. However, you can use them and field them in your games. They're just generally expensive, kind of a little bit weirder.
That thing is $121 just for one? Oh my god, but Forge World. Okay.
A little bit more bizarre and sometimes like fan-made creations and such, but Forge World is like a side company of Games Workshop that
$325. Bro, growing up I had Legos, and the most expensive one that I've ever bought in my entire life is $250. It's the ATTE with the dropship, but $325.
40K. I might mention them a few times. I wanted to go ahead and tell you about that. They're not used a ton, but they are something that you can use. Next, I want to tell you about hitting numbers. So if I ever say something like, oh, this army hits on 3s or 4s or 5s, what I'm saying is if they hit on 3s, that means if you roll a d6 and you throw it out there, if you get a 3, 4, 5, or 6, anything 3 or higher, then you hit your shot. You've landed onto your target. If I say they hit on 4s, it's 4 and up, 5s, 5 and up, etc. And finally, we have things called stratagems. I'm going to mention those a few times. Stratagems are like special abilities you can use after having a pool of command points that you get for building your army, and you can kind of dole those out, these special abilities, stratagems, as you wish. You ever played Command and Conquer, Red Alert 3, or perhaps Kane's Wrath? My personal favorite was always Kane's Wrath. You know those little abilities on the side of the map? It's like those. Let's start off with the #1 best army you should collect for a new player: Space Marines. Before we get into tactics, before we get into how they play, I want to remind you all of the most important rule, the golden rule of collecting Warhammer. You will always have a better time with the army whose lore you like and design you prefer. Always buy the army you think are the coolest. If you like undead Egyptian space robots that have enslaved gods as weapons, buy the damn Necrons. I don't care if Necrons are S tier or F tier, buy the damn Necrons, okay? If you love Viking aesthetic and you love Space Marines, get the damn Space Wolves. I don't care if they're S tier or F tier, get the army that you love the lore and the design of first. Nothing sucks more than playing a meta army that some people might not even want to play you against because you're going super power gamer and having to paint and create an army that you don't like. Play the army you think is the coolest. Golden rule.
Okay, so I just want to stop it right there for a second. So just going on what I got so far, like how he talked about like the dice roll and like those cards, it kind of reminds me of the game Risk, you know, that board game, because I played this board game a lot with my friends. Like if you roll the dice and if it's higher than your opponent, then you land a hit. If not, then you take a hit, things like that. And the special abilities, because those cards can help you like get numbers higher and things like that. Now, he said the golden rule: collect the army you enjoy and, you know, the style of it. So if it was up to me, based on like the Warhammer 40K quizzes that I've taken 2 of them so far, and if you guys haven't seen them already, go check them out. I would be actually, oh, by the way, this is a spoiler if you guys haven't seen those 2 videos. I would actually choose the Dark Angels. You'll know why from the other 2 videos. All right, let's continue.
Okay, Space Marines. So the poster boys of Warhammer are our first faction today, and I know when I said that the best army to collect, all the new players are like, oh god, not the Space Marines, the generic ones, and all the veteran players are going to say, oh god, not more Space Marine players I got to deal with, and the tournament players are already ready to hire a hitman to kill me. But I'm sorry, I know, I agree, Space Marines are, whew, right now, but they really are the best army. If you are a new player, Space Marines are your best bet. They are the best army to collect if you are a new player, and let me tell you why. Number one, Space Marines got all the lore. They got a monopoly on lore. They easily have the most fleshed out backgrounds of any of the characters or factions in Warhammer. Space Marines have the most books. Space Marines are a huge part of the Horus Heresy. Just Space Marines will always have the most, and they have the most depth to them. Number two, Space Marines are very easy to paint, especially for new players. When you get Space Marines, you have a ton of variety of chapters, and they all have a ton variety of colors, and they're also pretty easy. Space Marines are also very large, or at least larger than normal, so their canvas size is much bigger. Smooth armor, much easier to paint, especially their vehicles, and the paint schemes are easy. Ultramarines, blue, White Scar, white, Imperial Fist, yellow, Salamanders, green. It's extremely easy to paint Space Marines, and for a new player, I would highly recommend them for that specific part, because the painting and building is a massive part of this hobby. Number three, Marines are always getting new models. They are always getting equal attention from Games Workshop. Even if they have just been updated, they will get updated again and again and again, and the Harlequins and Dark Eldar players are crying in a corner, but we don't care about them because I got a new Primaris Lieutenant and he's got a skull shield. I don't know. They're always getting new models, and while it might be a little excessive at times, they will always be updated, and your rules will always be changing, and therefore it keeps it very fresh if you're interested in playing them. Number four, you have a vast amount of data sheets and units at your disposal. See, in a codex, you have a part, after all the lore of it, after some of the keywords and art pieces and stuff, you have the data sheet section where it goes over all of your units and what they do and their stats and everything, their special rules and so on. And when you get to that spot, however many units an army has depends on, well, how many pages of data sheets is it. Take the Adeptus Custodians. They have a very small amount of units, and their standard codex of data sheets is only 11 pages long. Sisters of Battle, however, a little more medium force. They have 19 pages of data sheets. The Imperial Guard, they have a much, much larger amount of data sheets because they're such a large army. They have 39 pages of data sheets. Space Marines, 56 pages of data sheets for different kinds of units. It's a little bloated at times because of the amount of characters and stuff, but still, they are all over the place. Their variety is endless, and it is being even more updated and added as time goes on. Which brings me to number five, and the most important of them all. Space Marines use every phase of the game. See, in Warhammer, there are phases in each turn. We're just getting into 9th edition, so we're getting something called the command phase soon, which is fine. But then we have the movement phase, psychic phase, shooting phase, the charge, fight, and then morale phase. Now, the last three are kind of all packed into one, if I'm being perfectly honest, but the main thing is that a lot of armies might utilize some of these phases a lot more often than expected. Grey Knights are very big in the psychic phase because they're all psychers, and so they really have a lot there, while Tau don't have any psychers, and they won't even use that phase, but they've got really damn good shooting. However, they don't have any melee, so they're not going to be using the charge phase, whereas, say, Slanesh Demons will use the charge and psychic phase plenty, but they won't be doing any shooting of like any kind, pretty much. The Marines, they will use every single phase, and you can't get good at the game and get good at the phases unless you're able to use all of them. And that's where Space Marines really shine. You can play them however you want in any kind of role. See, if you are running, let's say, an Iron Hands or Imperial Fist army, these are both shooting-based armies. But you can still have good melee, where if you wanted to play a more melee-based army like Space Wolves or Blood Angels, you'd still have good shooting units. You could still do plenty in the shooting phase. That's the most important part. Space Marines will use every single phase, and they are very, very good at it. So that is the main 5 reasons why you should be playing, or at least you should try collecting Space Marines. And I know I don't need more Space Marines in tournaments, but it is the best decision. They're good to paint, they're good to collect, they're always getting updated, they got tons of units, they use every phase, and you can tailor them however you'd like. Plus, and this is kind of down the line.
Okay, so the part where it says they're easy to paint and all that, so does that mean that they just like come with no color and you gotta like paint them on your own or something like that? Because if that's the case, that's not gonna be for me, because I have bad artistic ability. Like my handwriting sucks, my drawing sucks, and all that. So no, I cannot do that. If it comes to down to that, I'm gonna need to like pay someone to do that for me, because I cannot paint, I can't draw, I can't write, nothing. No. All right, continue.
But eventually, after playing them enough, you might understand which army you'd want to collect second. If you start collecting a little bit of Space Marines, you start realizing, oh wow, I really think I'd prefer having more models on the table, or I wish I had tougher models. Then you can go for Tyranids or then Adepto Custodians. It helps you figure out your second army a lot better. If you're a new player, you want to get interested in it, just do this. Go online, get yourself either, or check eBay, because there's tons of offhand Marine stuff on eBay. Get yourself a pack of Intercessors or maybe a tactical squad. I'd say Intercessors because they're more modern, they're newer and more meta, and they're bigger for better paint canvases. Put them together with some glue, get some paint on them, try them out, and try getting into the game that way. I think it'd be a pretty smart and a pretty solid idea to get someone new into the hobby, and Space Marines just really are one of the better choices right now. Okay, whew. Now that I'm done sucking as much Marine dick as your brain, let's move on to the rest of the armies. And my personal favorite army at the current moment, the Imperial Guard, or the is fucking the Imperial Guard. The Imperial Guard are my main army. They are what is known as a gunline horde army. Whereas Orcs and Tyranids have a horde army that has shooting but it's more melee based, the Guard is going to be running 60 to 100 infantrymen, support walkers, artillery batteries, aircraft, drop troops, tanks, bigger tanks. The Guard is all about just blistering firepower. Now, however, the downside to this is that the Guard, while well-trained, are only 4-up well-trained. They hit on 4s, and they also do not have very good survivability. Guard stuff tends to be rather fragile. They very rarely have any special saves to keep them from taking any damage. Most of their stratagems aren't based around survivability, but in fact more firepower. Guard don't shoot amazing with their 4-up accuracy, but they make up for that with just sheer amounts of numbers of shots. I don't care if my tank hits on 4s when I've got fucking 3 of them. If the Marines are like the pristine Swiss Army knife where they can do anything and they have a little tool for every situation, Guard are like a Swiss Army knife that's about 10 times as big and attached to a big wooden stick that you just beat the shit out of people with. Your units are squishy, they don't hit great, but you've got so many of them that you just take people out by drowning them in gunfire. As for collecting the Guard, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. Their models are a bit older than I'd like. I personally think that they could use a decent amount of updates. They do get updated plenty rules-wise, but since they've got so many different kinds of units and so many Forge World options, a lot of them are a bit old and are showing their age. As for collecting them in the money side, they're pretty expensive. You're going for a horde army, so you're going to have tons of models on the playing field. That being said, I still do love them. I love their lore and their design. I love the large swaths of infantry, and I personally think they are pretty fun, if maybe not the greatest army as a main army. The Adeptus Mechanicus are the war.
Okay. So basically, what I got from Bricky about the Imperial Guard is they have the numbers and the firepower on their side, but when it comes to their survivability, so I'm thinking like taking damage, like like hit points and accuracy, they're not the ones. So basically, you can swarm them, you can keep throwing numbers at them, but overall, your chances of like hitting the targets is, I guess he says, is not fantastic, but they make up for it in like other ways. So I get it. Like no army is like invincible and they don't have like all like the great stuff. Every single army has its flaws. Now, this one, Adeptus Mechanicus. This is the one thing you guys keep on putting in my comments ever since I mentioned about my car. And okay, I admit that I did pronounce it incorrectly, the Omnissiah. Because I accidentally said Omniscia. But like I said, I was just going off of like the pronunciation online, like how they broke it down. And I still said it wrong. But I got it. Omnissiah. Adeptus Mechanicus.
Of Mars. They are very weird, and I've been over how weird they are plenty before, but they are probably one of the wackiest armies in the game, maybe along with Jeansteer Colts. The Adeptus Mechanicus have a lot of really weird back and forth styles when it comes to their gameplay. They're mainly a shooting army. I'd say they're about 75% shooting, 25% melee. However, they do have a couple dedicated melee units that can hurt pretty bad, but they're much lower on the tier list compared to the amount of gunfire.
Oh, right. I forgot to add. So what he said about the Imperial Guard, based on accuracy. So judging by from what he said, I'm guessing there's not many melee units with the Imperial Guard. It's mostly all range. But now, yeah, when he just said melee units, that just like popped in my head. So I just wanted to get that out of the way.
Can bring. They hit pretty well. They generally hit on 3s, sometimes 4s, depending on if they're using mechs or their own current bionics. But they do definitely have some of the wackier stuff. The entire army has a 6-up invulnerability save, so occasionally you get some pretty clutch moments when you start taking damage and you roll a couple dice and you get a couple 6s and you can shrug off like full-on missiles and stuff. So that is pretty cool. Like one of their base weapons is a really regular, kind of crappy carbine, but if you roll a 6 for it, it does double damage, which can actually be ludicrously powerful at times. Then you've got the weird robots, the Castellan robots, that they're these giant like World War I mech dudes that have a refractor field, so if they block off shots with their reflector invulnerable save, it'll launch back damage towards the enemy, which can be kind of crazy. They're very strange. They definitely are quite strange. Much more shooting over melee and definitely fun. It has some great looking characters. Belisarius Call might be one of the best models in the entire game. Super cool looking too. A bitch to paint though. Oh my god. And that does lead me to the collecting of the AdMech part itself. They're actually getting a lot more newer updates lately. They're actually one of the newest armies as well. They came out only a couple years ago. All their stuff is in plastic and it looks really damn good. I personally think that they have some of the best aesthetics in the entire game. The only problem is that painting them is going to be a real bitch. I would recommend trying to do some of the simpler stuff, like maybe the Dune Crawler, before you get into things like Call or a Tech Priest Dominus, because wow, is painting that going to be really damn hard. Cost-wise, they are getting a bunch of new units, which is great, but generally when you get new units, they are very expensive, and whenever new stuff comes out, it tends to be a bit expensive. The army isn't a horde, but it's also not an elite army, so they're probably in the mid-ground when it comes to price range. However, I would recommend them to people who like some kind of wacky antics and some weird abilities and weaponry, because AdMech has been getting better and better as time goes on, and they're pretty dang cool to collect. So mid-tier price, maybe a little bit more expensive, but their scopes look great and they're very new, and I would highly recommend them. Next up, you've got the Adepto Soras, or also known as the Sisters of Battle, my second favorite army, though I will be honest, they are really coming up to overtaking the Imperial Guard. I love my Guard, I love my Cadians, really? I love my Tempesta Scions, but the Sisters of Battle, they're really cool. Not only from a lore perspective, they're just insanely religious, zealotous nuns. That already is just really dang cool. As for the tabletop, they're one of the closest range armies in the entire game that isn't a full-on melee army. They're a slow-moving, like advancing gunline army with some actually horrifying melee units and just some like ridiculous close-range firepower. The Sisters are probably one of the top 3 hardest armies to play, I'd say. They've got some really weird antics as well, kind of like AdMech, maybe not quite as wacky. This army can be played in almost any way as well. You can do this a full gunline army or a full melee army, or 50-50. Everything is viable. They do require a lot of finesse and manipulation, because these are all low toughness Sisters that do have good armor, but when you've got a low toughness like they do, and they're not necessarily the most powerful when it comes to the actual punching, they can actually be shot off pretty quickly. So you need to be really smart on how you maneuver them, because you've got a super short range, kind of squishy army at times. That can be a little bit challenging to get through. That being said, people are sleeping on the power of Sisters. let me be the first one to say it, you are all sleeping on how strong this army is. This army, if played well by a smart person, will crush you. As for the actual collecting of the models, Sisters are the most recent army, at least as the time of making this video, who have had a complete army overhaul. For a while, there were no plastic sister models whatsoever, but the entire army, besides I think one unit, got a full overhaul of models. Everything is brand spanking new, and they probably have the best looking models in the entire game, in my opinion. They look incredible. That crazy gothic, kind of Catholic nun look. I mean, come on, their tank is a pipe organ missile launcher. It's a pipe organ missile launcher. Sisters are cool, one of the coolest looking armies in the entire game. They are a bit expensive though. That's the one downside, is that because this entire army is brand new, it is brand new with a brand new price tag. So I personally love them. They might soon become my favorite army. I can't quite tell yet. They look great. They're a little expensive to collect. They have lots of different kinds of abilities, both melee and shooting. No psychic phase, but they do have some shenanigans to stop other people from using the psychic phase. They're pretty cool, but they are really hard to play, and they take a lot of practice. So kind of up to you. I would say not a very good starting army, but they are pretty neat. All right, Grey Knights. I heard you like this.
Okay, so with the Sisters of Battle, from what he's saying, like, they're brand new. So, as he said, they're most expensive. Like, hey, that's to be expected. Like, whoever's brand new is pretty much has like the highest number on the price tag compared to the others. But the designs are pretty cool. I will say that. Like, the tanks and the units and everything really do look cool. But when he says that they're hard to play, so I guess that is not like a unit or faction to start off with. That is like a faction if you're already pretty much like experienced and like an expert like Bricky. But for someone like me, I would be struggling pretty bad. So for me personally, I would start off with the Space Marines. But like I said, Dark Angels, if Dark Angels is available. If not, then okay. All right, next, Grey Knights.
Psychic phase. If you like the psychic phase, this is the psychic phase for you. Grey Knights are Space Marines X2. They're super mega duper elite Space Marines that are all psychers. They're nuts. Grey Knights are insane. They are very, very elite. However, you have probably like maybe 40% fewer models than an average army will have. All of your dudes, however, are scary in their own right. They all hit very well on 3s minimum. They all have great armor. Since they're all psychers, they're really good at dealing with other psychers. They also have great shooting and very strong melee. All of your guys have extremely powerful melee weapons. The only downside of Grey Knights is that any anti-psyker shenanigans can really harm them, and you are running an elite army with very few models. When you run very few models, that means every time you're rolling and you roll those ones, it hurts that much more. Grey Knights, though, they have this awesome kind of old school knight round table aesthetic with them all carrying things like halberds and falchions. They've got holy text and they carry books around and flags, but they do get to use every phase as well. Lots of psychic, and then they're shooting and a ton of melee as well. Mainly psychic and melee. In terms of buying them, they're not too bad actually. They're probably one of the cheaper armies as well, because when you're running an elite army, not as many models on the tabletop, so it's a lot easier to fill out your entire army by only purchasing many or fewer boxes than normal. As for their scopes, I don't know exactly how new they are. I wouldn't call them very new. I call them like middle ground when it comes to how old they are. They're not super old, but they're not necessarily super new either. That being said, if they are, say, medium old or whatever, they do look great. I love the way the plastic models look. I think they look fantastic, and I would recommend trying them out if you like a psyker-heavy Space Marine thing. You play Space Marines and you're like, wow, I like the psychic phase. Grey Knights, no competition. Infantry is for losers.
Damn, I don't know why I stopped right there, but okay, Grey Knights. By the way, I'm gonna be doing this for every faction. So Grey Knights, very strong, very good accuracy. He said 3s minimums and above. However, he said fewer models, so numbers are not on their side. So you really gotta take your chances on, like, you'll have a strong hit, you'll have a strong attack, but you don't have much to spare. So that's pretty much what I got from him about Grey Knights. Now, the Imperial Knights.
It's big mech boy time. If I'm being honest though, the Imperial Knights, I wouldn't recommend them. I'm just going to come out and say it. I don't think Imperial Knights are a very good army for a new player. They are one of the cheapest armies you can buy because while each knight in its own right is very expensive, you only need 3 or 4 to fill out an entire game's worth. And compare that to a full army, they're actually not too bad, like price-wise. The problem with Knights is that, as cool as they are, they want to use the Psyche phase. They have plenty of shooting, though, plenty of shooting, and they can have some really great melee. But when you're playing Imperial Knights, you're not really playing 40k. A great friend of mine said, if you're playing Imperial Knights, you're playing chess, but you have about 6 queens against a normal enemy chess player. If the enemy chess player is smart, they can easily beat your 6 queens. I'm sure it'll be pretty simple for them to use their full arsenal to beat you. But if the enemy chess player is a noob, for instance, then there's a good chance that they're not going to be able to win, and you'll just kind of noob stomp them. And that's what Knights are. Knights are generally noob stompers, or more like just a middle tier army. They're not good for new players because they don't really teach you the game, and it's not the way the game is really, I don't know how to say it, meant to be played, so to speak. I got nothing against Knight players. If you're a Knight player, it's totally fine. If you run a Knight Valiant, you have nothing but my respect. All right, get that Knight Valiant, 2-up armor, 4-up invul, Traitor's Pyre. Oh, you can't have both. Just have Traitor's Pyre, the coolest weapon in the game. All right, but honestly, just for a new player, I would not recommend Knights. They are cool. They're great painting projects, however. If you just want to paint something, definitely pick up a Knight for that. They look great. You're not really playing 40k when you play Imperial Knights. You're playing kind of a weird hybrid of it. If anything, get a normal army like, say, Imperial Guard or maybe some Space Marines, and then buy one big Knight and throw it into your army as an ally. That would be the way to do it, I'd say. I think they're better as a supplementary character as opposed to a main army or force. This is also same for Chaos Knights as well. They do look really cool, though. They do look really cool. Golden Boys. Adepto Custodians are the elite of the elite. This is probably one of the most elite armies you could possibly play. These guys are nuts. They hit on 2s or higher in shooting and melee. They have triple the health of a normal Space Marine. They have a better armor save than a normal Space Marine. They all have invulnerable refractor fields around them, which most armies do not have. They're tougher than Marines. They get to reroll 1s in the shooting and melee phase when a certain captain is near them, which means they're hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s. You absolutely murder people in melee. You've got some okay shooting. Your shooting is hit or miss, but your melee is insane, and you use about 20 models. They are literally the definition of Chad Thundercock, okay? Chad Thundercock, if that was a human being, it would be a custodian, okay? The problem is that you only have 15, 20, 25 models in your entire army. It is absolutely crazy how powerful these guys are, but they do pay the price for it. That being said, when it comes to collecting them, they are one of the cheapest armies you can buy. Because they're so elite, you don't need as many things to purchase, you don't need as many models to have on the field, so buying Custodians is much cheaper than your average army. It's an elite army, and also they're much easier to paint, in my opinion, because they're so big, because they're like 2 feet taller than a Space Marine, lots of a big canvas for your painting, and they're almost all gold. Gold isn't that hard to paint, I wouldn't say. So they're good for painting, they're not very expensive. I would say they're not bad at beginner army.
Okay, he says gold is not that hard to paint, but somehow, knowing me, I'm still gonna find some way to mess up, so let's continue. But they look really cool in my opinion.
If I'm being honest, they're pretty cool. They have a nice kind of power fantasy to them, but as an elite army, every one you roll is gonna really hurt. So that's something you should be worried about, or warned about at least. They are pretty neat, though. I'm not going to touch on the Assassins, Sisters of Silence, or Inquisition too much because they're not really an actual army. The Assassins are really damn cool. There's 4 of them, and you get to pick one to add to your army as you see fit. They all have different things they do and specialize in. A sniper, a horde clear, a kind of confusion specialist, and an anti-psyker character. Cool, their scopes are really nice, and since they're only single characters, not too expensive, but you really can't make an army out of them. They're more of a supplementary character. The Sisters of Silence just recently got an update to allow you to field them with Custodians, which is awesome and super cool, and is actually kind of a big part of them because the Sisters of Silence are big anti-psyker, but they only have maybe 2 kits, 3 kits in their entire army, and that's about it. They're not really worth collecting in their own right unless you're already collecting custodians. And the Inquisition are a whole bunch of just little characters, basically. A whole bunch of named characters with cool abilities, which are neat, but not really something that I would try to get a whole bunch of. Look at all 3 of those things after you're already starting collecting another army, and you're like, hey, I kind of want an assassin. Throw an assassin in there. Unless you're playing custodians, then check out the Sisters of Silence, because the custodian's biggest weakness is psychic, and the sisters do a great job at cutting that down. All right, let's move on to Chaos. So we got the Chaos Demons to start off with. Chaos Demons follow one of 4 gods: Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, or Slaanesh Big Titty. With Slaanesh Big Titty, you're going for melee and fast. You are all melee, you've got no shooting, you got good psychic spells, but you're running in there at Mach 5. Papa Nurgle is slow, but tanky as his guts are all out. Tzeentch, a little bit in between, but tons of psychic spells. Khorne, no psychic, melee, hits like a truck. Pretty much all of the Chaos Demon factions are glass cannons and very heavy into melee. You got some good psychers for about 3 of the 4, because Khorne I don't think has any. So there is still plenty of variety in there, but what you're doing is you got a whole bunch of big glass cannon demons that run up and just break your face. That's Chaos Demons in a nutshell. They all have their various traits. Slaanesh is fast and hits a lot of times. Nurgle is tanky. Tzeentch is psyker. Khorne hits really hard. Pretty simple in that sense. But overall, Chaos Demons, to collect them, they're not something you would really collect by themselves. You would ally them in with things like Chaos Space Marines, which we're going to be talking about in just a moment. But as an army in their own right, don't try to make a demon army, I wouldn't say. They don't teach you a ton of the game, and they're a little bit limited because you have to stick with one Chaos faction normally. If you want to ally in multiple things, you're probably going to need some Chaos Space Marines to go along with it. And with that, let's talk about that. Chaos Space Marines, you're kind of getting the butt end of Games Workshop. They don't really seem to like you, Chaos, that much. I don't know why. A lot of your models aren't very new, and a lot of them are expensive, and your rules aren't that great most of the time, with the exception of something that happened in 7th edition with Chaos Demons, apparently. I heard it was a very, very strong codex. Chaos Space Marines are very similar to regular Space Marines, but they're much more focused on melee combats. You still have shooting, and it depends on which faction you're going through as well. But while you do have your shooting units, it is generally more melee-based, I'd say. Demons in their own right, and Chaos in their own right, want to run in there and start breaking face. That's generally their MO. As for Chaos Space Marines, it depends on what legion you're joining, but overall, there are a ton of different ways for you to go ahead and get about completing your objective. The Death Guard and the Thousand Suns, I believe, are the most fleshed out. They both have their own codexes. They both have their own special units, especially Death Guard. Death Guard is very recent, and both of them allow you to field a Primarch, which might be one of the coolest parts about them. You can run Mortarion or Magnus the Red. Both gigantic, beautiful models that are just awesome showpieces.
They actually do really
cool. They get shot a lot, but once they get into combat, oh man, do they cause problems. As stated before, you should be building what you'd like, of course. What you enjoy is the most important part of it. But as for Chaos, it's really, you gotta like melee combat, and you gotta like different kinds of allying, probably. I'd say Demons aren't, not Demons, but Chaos in general isn't a great faction to start off with as a new player, because you need to understand the intricacies of how to do army building and knowing what you're running a little bit more prevalently. And so I'd wait on doing anything Chaos related, at least until they get a solid update, or someone teaches you, or you get a little more into the hobby. With the exception of Death Guard. I think Death Guard is in a good place for a new player, because Death Guard is pretty cool. But besides that, they're a little tough. Okay, let's talk about some Xenos, starting off with the Space Elves, the Eldar. So the Eldar are definitely a more glass cannon-y kind of style group. They are the first Xenos race we're talking about, and there are a couple versions. There's also the Drukhari and the Harlequins. However, the Eldar, they are strike hard, strike fast, and get out of there immediately. So the thing about Eldars, what would happen is they would fly out of somewhere, immediately gun down with extremely high power weaponry, hitting on threes with some kind of BS stratagems, if I'm being honest, and then they can zip back into cover and really annoy you. Honestly, Eldar probably have some of the more powerful shenanigans when it comes to the game. They have lots of weird rules. Their stuff hits extremely hard, but of course, once you fire back at them, if you live, they will crumble under a slight breeze to an extent. If you play Eldar, you won't be making a bunch of friends, if I'm being honest. I'd say Eldar are top 3 most aggravating enemies to fight against. People don't like fighting Eldar a whole lot. Myself included, I find them to be quite aggravating. But if you're that kind of person who likes zip in, zip out, and be all kind of trickery and sneaky, they're definitely the army for you. They're definitely more shooting and psychic based. That's the 2 main things. They've got some good melee, but mainly shooting and psychic based. As for collecting Craft World Eldar, I'd say they got some good sculpts. Some of their models look pretty good. They got some nice plastic. A few of it's a little bit older, but you don't need a huge army. So when it comes to the money side of it, not too bad. I'd say the financials for it are pretty dang solid, and I wouldn't call them an expensive army to collect, at least not from my knowledge. The Dark Eldar, or the Drukhari, are like Eldar cranked up to 12. They're faster, they can hit harder at some points, and they have really good melee units. Their melee units can actually be really scary, but they are also doubly made of paper. They're also a lot harder to play. They're probably top 3 hardest armies to play, along with the Sisters of Battle. And that actually goes on to the Harlequins as well. Harlequins are an army that just don't collect Harlequins, if I'm being honest. They're not a great choice. They have barely any models.
Sorry about that. So basically, he said top 3 factions are the hardest to play. So we got Dark Eldar and the Sisters of Battle. So I wonder what the third one is. I'm pretty sure, because we have like 13.5 minutes left, so I'm pretty sure he'll hit on it within maybe the next 5 to 10 minutes. All right, let's continue.
They're really weird, and they have a lot of shenanigans if you want to pull them off. If you're a new player, I would not recommend Harlequins at all. Dark Eldar, Eldar, and Harlequins, speedy, made of paper, hit like absolute trucks, and not too expensive, I wouldn't say. Drukhari, I think, is a little bit more expensive than the other 2, but not too pricey because you don't field a ton of units in your armies. Moving on, we got Tyranids, bugs. Yeah, got bugs. You gotta love those bugs. So many bugs. Now, Tyranids obviously are a horde army. It should be very obvious. They are also a melee horde army. Whoa, I know, call the presses. You are mainly spending your time in the melee phase, as well as some of the psychic phase. You got a lot of good psychers in the Tyranids army, funny enough. You've got some pretty involved and advanced bugs. And your melee phase is as it seems. You have really gigantic, gargantuan creatures that eat everything alive, or you've got 40,000 little boys that eat everything alive. You do actually have some somewhat good shooting too with your Exocrine and your Hive Guard. You can put out some pretty decent shots. They are definitely the kind of army you run if you want big swaths of just these angry little running bug dudes that just swarm on your enemy. It's literally called the Tyranid Swarm. As for price wise though, I'd say they're actually very, very expensive to collect. Their scopes are some are a little bit older, but not all of them. They're a little bit in between when it comes to the actual date release for their scopes. I'd say they are a bit older, though they are expensive. They're expensive, and you're running a horde army, so that's definitely one of the top more expensive armies to collect because, come on, tons of bugs, tons of models, and older scopes. Can be a little bit of a challenge. Jeansteer Colts. You want to play bugs, but you want to play human bugs with scrotum heads. Jeansteer Colts are a very new addition. Very, very new. And they run in this...
Yeah, I never heard of them. The Jeansteer Colts. So this one's going to be pretty new.
Almost as weird as AdMech style army. They're very fast, they hit really hard, and they like dip underground, they crawl from underground, they hit you with very powerful short-range weaponry and super strong melee attack, and then they kind of run away and they like zip, hit and run tactics. That's probably the best way to do it. Hit and run tactics, they come out of the ground, they spook you, they do a bunch of damage, they run away, they got some weird psychic spells here and there, they run these like makeshift Mad Max trucks and stuff. They definitely have a unique play style. They deploy strangely, they like to zip around the place kind of strangely, and they definitely are one of the more unique armies there are. Would I recommend collecting them? No. They kind of fulfill a niche, but they're not that like overarchingly special, I'd say. I don't know what the word is exactly, but they are a very specific play style for a very specific player. If you're running Tyranids, you might consider doing Jeansteer Colts, but at that point, you already kind of know what you're doing, so I don't think I recommend this to a new player. Jeansteer Colts and Tyranids both A little bit rough to recommend to a new person because they are very expensive, both of them. And while the models for Jeansteer Colts are definitely a lot newer and that's much nicer, they need practice. They are definitely a harder army, and I would recommend waiting on those if you're a new player. Orcs!
Here we go.
Orcs. Now, Orcs. I would say Orcs are great if you like the Horde army and you like having RNG dictate your life. So Orcs hit on 5s.
Just like damn. Orcs hit on 5s? Damn. I thought we can't go any higher than that. But anyways, the reason I stopped is because just based on what he said, the Jeanstealers and also the Tyranids, I'm guessing that's the third faction he was mentioning that is very hard to play. So I think we hit on all three factions that are very difficult to play if you're very new to this, which is me. All right. Man, Orcs hit on 5. God.
Mentioned in my last video. However, if you roll a 6, you get to make another attack with the weapon. Everything from the little pistol to the giant rocket launcher. You can have a rocket launcher that fires 3 times, and if you get lucky enough, you can have it fire 5 times. But the main thing that you're probably going to be jumping with Orcs for is the giant green tide, because their melee ability is pretty humongous. They have very weird gunfire. They got their weird weapons and their strange rules, the Daka rules to allow them to get all these extra shots.
That's like construction
They can even
equipment.
have some pretty dang good shooting with things like shock attack guns and Daka jets and stuff. If Orcs hit on 5s and shooting, they hit on like 3s in melee. Orcs love to beat the hell out of each other. So it's very obvious that once they get into melee, they'll just start pounding on you because they are really good at hitting stuff. In fact, I might be speaking a little bit too hyperbolically when I say RNG controls your life with Orcs. Or RNG controls your shooting, but your melee is actually pretty dang good. They've got a special ability called Here We Go, which allows them to re-roll their charge dice, which is a very rare thing and extremely powerful buff. Getting into melee has never been easier if you're an Orc. As for collecting Orcs, expensive. Probably the most expensive Horde army there is. Probably more expensive than Tyranids or Guard or anything in between. They have sculpts that are sometimes new, sometimes very old. You can have cool new models like Gazgul Thraka, but then you got a whole bunch of really damn old Orc models because Orcs have been around forever. Their codex in their own right is pretty neat, and there's some pretty good models in there, but Orcs just, they're showing their age, and you need a shitload of them. And they are very expensive for that reason. So they're expensive to collect, and you need a ton to collect a good-sized army. But
and a lot of money.
If you like melee with some really fun shenanigans and a bit of RNG, I can see why someone would like Orcs, because they're Orcs. Come on, they're great. Let's talk Necrons. So the Necrons, if I had to pick a Xenos army, I'd play Necrons, honestly. Necrons, I mean, they're just so cool. Undead. Yeah. Egyptian
Look at that.
Skeleton robots that carry enslaved gods into battle. How is that the coolest thing ever? So Necrons are...
So the first time I saw like this faction, the Necrons, the first thing it reminded me is what is that name of that villain? So that big metal villain that fights against Superman that's powered by kryptonite. Oh, Metallo, yeah. So ever since I saw them, they look like an army of Metallos, just like powered by kryptonite, and they're out to get Superman. That's the first thing that came to my mind when I saw this. All right.
Fittingly named, all about necromancy, but not like the undead homina necromancy, but like necromancy through metal. So the way Necrons are is that they are kind of a slow-moving, at least some of their units slow-moving, gun line with some mixed-in melee units. Not all their army is melee, but their melee units that they have are actually like really scary. But for a while, Necrons are kind of slow-moving Terminator-style guys. They just blast you away at a distance with some very powerful weaponry. They kind of have Space Marine stat lines, actually. They run about as many models as Space Marines. They got similar stat lines and similar weaponry. I'd say that they're actually quite similar to Space Marines in the terms of how they play. But they actually do have a lot of weird shenanigans that make Necrons their own. For instance, the main thing that you might want to pick Necrons for is their reanimation protocols. Special ability that, let's say you got 10 units of your base Necron unit, warriors, for instance. You got 10 Necron warriors, your basic troop choice. Your opponent kills like, let's say 7. Kills 7 of them, you got 3 of them left. Their turn ends, your turn starts. You then roll a dice for every dead model. So 7 models, 7 dice. And for every 5 or higher, you automatically get one of your models to just stand right back up. Your Necron just goes like Your vehicles regenerate health as time goes on. You have special abilities to maybe make your Necrons come back on a 4-up instead of a 5. You can reroll your 1s for it. It's all about getting your units to come back up and being like, if you're fighting Necrons, you better kill it. Because if you leave it wounded, it's going to repair itself, and that's not a very good thing. That's the idea of Necrons. They got good shooting, they got good melee, and honestly, now is a good time to be a Necron player. They are getting a massive update right now. This is right before 9th when this video is coming out. And they are getting huge new model ranges, a ton of just new units in general, massive updates, rule updates. Necrons are getting big additions, and I think it's going to be super great. Now is a good time to be a Necron player. The new stuff might be a little expensive to collect because it is new stuff. That being said, they're not an elite army, but I guess they can't be played an elite army if they wanted to, but they don't have a few models, they don't have too many models, they're nice in between, and now is a damn good time for it. Last but not least, we have the Tau Empire. The Tau Empire is for people who want to gun their opponent down with the most sci-fi hardcore Gundam giant mech stuff you can think of. Yeah, I was about to say, they look like Gundams. You want to have your entire enemy obliterated off the board through just the unrelenting volley of railgun shots and rail rifles and fusion blasters. You will look up and you will see missiles, giant homing missiles, blot out the sky as it rains down on your army because the Tau player's got 40,000 missile pods on all of his characters. He's got flying drones to fire laser sights to mark them to have better accuracy, to block shots, and your big battle suit will be rolling up and then a drone will come in and block a missile from it. The Tau are definitely more of an Eastern inspired, definitely a Gundam kind of look to them. And they are just ludicrously powerful in shooting phase. And they also have tons of special abilities to stop your opponent from getting to you in the charge phase. The Tau has no melee. Their melee is straight garbage. When a Tau infantry start punching, it means they've lost. And you might think to yourself, wow, Bricky, this sounds great and aggravating. Yep, that's about right. The Tau get a lot of shit. Some of it warranted, some of it not so warranted. The models in their own right definitely don't fit very well with 40k. They're much more of a sci-fi Gundam style thing compared to a gothic, grimdark sci-fi fantasy. However, I do think they do look pretty cool in their own right. It's just kind of weird in this universe. But when you've got an entire army whose whole job is to blast you away from incredible ranges across the map, and every time you even try to retaliate, they either gun you down when you try to charge or they block your shots with drones, it can be pretty aggravating. That being said, there are really cool new ways to play Tau, like close range attacks with Cold Star battle suits in the Farsight Enclaves, which, by the way, if you ever use a Cold Star battle suit, or a Cold Star commander, I suppose, or a Yavara, you have my respect. So you do have different options when it comes to Tau instead of just sit back and fire. But you definitely don't got much melee. You definitely don't got much melee. You suck.
Yeah, I just see guns and turrets.
But if you just want to gun people down and the only phase you care about is the shooting phase, you don't care about psyche, you don't care about melee, you just want to blast people, Tau is definitely for you. As it comes for collecting them, their scopes are pretty good. They're not entirely super new, but they do look great. They have a whole bunch of different kinds of mechs, big and small. They got drones, big and small. They got infantry units and everything. They do look solid, high-tech, and their scopes do look nice. They're also, I'd say, not too expensive. You don't need a ton of them, and the battle suits themselves are expensive for each box, but you only need so many of them because they are very expensive when it comes to the points cost in the game. So Tau are on the middle level of the expensive tier. Whew, that was a lot of talking right there. That covers it, though. That is every army in 40k for you trying to figure out which army you want to play. I will reiterate, Space Marines, they are the best. I know it kind of sucks for some of us, but trust me, they are the best. I would highly recommend if you're trying to get into it, get a box of Intercessors, check out the rules, paint them up maybe. 9th edition is coming very, very soon. It looks extremely promising, and I think now is probably the best time to be jumping into this hobby. I want more people to be a part of this community, to be a part of this fandom. I think it is exciting. I think it has a little something for everyone, and I don't want anyone at all to not feel welcomed, not on any basis, not on basis of age, sex, gender, race. I don't give a shit, okay? I don't care who you are. I want you to at least give it a shot and be a part of this group with me because I would always love new people. And honestly, there's no
That's good to
reason
hear.
why you shouldn't have a good time along with the rest of us. So, yeah. Thank you so much for watching this video, everybody. It was a pleasure having you here. Check out this plate in the description, please. They are the wonderful sponsor for today's video, and they were actually quite wonderful to work with as well. And plus, with so much Warhammer stuff, I'm sure you can find something that you can definitely decorate your wall with for a decent price as well. As for me, my name has been Bricky. I have a Patreon if you'd like to support me. As you can see, all the names flying up on the screen right now, these are all the people on the $10 or up tier who have decided to help support me on my videos. You are all absolutely wonderful. And I want to give a special shout out to my top 3 patrons currently, which are Big Papa Nergs, which is so fitting for today, Drunken Legends, the absolute crazy Texas man, and of course, Krieg the Psycho, which is a wonderful Borderlands reference. The 3 of you, you are on the top tier for Patreon, and I really do appreciate it. I wouldn't be able to make this many videos without you guys, and it is wonderful having you here. And I see you on the Twitch stream all the time, so I know you guys. I know you around. It's good. I'll see you soon. Besides that, if you want to check out my Twitch stream, I stream multiple times a week, is in the description. I would love to have you there. We can talk a little bit Warhammer or anything in between, just play some games. And finally, if you're interested in copying some merchandise like the one I'm wearing, or maybe just get a little bit of bee stickers up in your world, check that out too. All right, I don't know what video I'm going to be making next. It might be a League one, but I might hop onto more 9th edition stuff when 9th edition comes out. Perhaps I'll even make a video on how to play it. But until then, thank you so much for watching. My name has been Bricky, and the Emperor protects. Bye-bye.
All right, so that was it. So that was what's the best Warhammer 40k faction army to start with. Now, like I said, I'm brand new. I don't know anything about this, but judging by like what his description was, there are 2 factions I would actually start off as he said, Space Marines, because they're I guess they're a little bit more like versatile and a little bit easier to like adapt to. So them, but I also am very interested in the Necrons, like how they look and just their designs, and how he says like regenerating health and also resurrecting some units that you lost. That sounds really cool in my opinion. So those are the 2 factions I would be interested in. And also Bricky, he did an amazing job at like explaining each faction and explaining like, so the specialty of these guys are they are very strong, they're very powerful. However, their flaws and weaknesses are there's not many of them, or they don't have good accuracy, or they're just really hard to play. So he really touched on all points, and that's really good to hear. And for someone like me who's brand new to all this, he made it like easy to understand. So a shout out to Bricky for doing that. But anyways, I want to hear from you guys. If you guys had to like start off with the Warhammer 40k faction, who would you choose as well? Like put it down in the comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts. But anyways, thank you guys for watching. Here's another Warhammer 40k video by Bricky, and it was amazing, just like the other videos that he's done. Also, make sure to hit that notification bell so you know when I drop another video. Also, check out my other videos, my Warhammer 40k videos, my Star Wars videos, Halo gameplay videos. Go check them out. And also, thank you for your support in this channel. I really do appreciate it. I hope basically, you guys are the reason why I'm able to like put out so many videos, and that's how I'm able to keep my head up. I know some of you guys are saying like, man, you're posting like at least 1 or 2 videos a day. How do you, like, you're gonna burn yourself out. Sure, it's a lot of time consuming, and I get it, it takes a lot of time. However, hearing from you guys is what pushes me forward to keep on doing it, and I love doing what I am doing. So that's why. So again, thank you so much for your support. A big thank you to all of you. And I hope you guys are having an amazing day or night wherever you guys are, and I'll see you guys next time.